Hey everyone, it's Andy here, and today I'm going to talk about the high likelihood of faster tax refunds in 2023, thanks to a lot of the planned IRS improvements that were funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. I'll talk a little bit about what was broken, what is going to be fixed with all the funding, and what you may see in 2023 with your tax refunds. As always, if you like what you see here, please hit the like button, and you can always subscribe to keep getting more tax videos like this throughout tax season. So a lot of the updates that I'm going to go through here today were actually announced recently by Janet Yellen, who is the head of the Treasury, which the IRS falls under. She made a lot of these at a recent talk at the IRS facility in New Carrollton, Maryland. I'll put a link in the description to the full statement and remarks, but she highlighted a few key points that is the focus for next year, and hopefully if these get done, in time, you'll actually see a lot of improvements to tax processing and tax refunds in last year. And after years of underfunding, it's important that the IRS is able to operate more efficiently because it does collect 96% of the revenue that funds the federal government. So it's a pretty high priority. And despite lots of political bickering about extra funding, the new money has been allocated. So we should definitely see some improvements in 2023, even if we don't see all of them. I think everyone knows the IRS is probably broken from a processing perspective, especially those people who had to wait for several weeks and months to get their tax return. I know some are still waiting for their 2020 and 2021 returns and refunds to be paid. And the IRS has acknowledged, many studies came out earlier this year to basically say that the IRS was only able to answer 2 out of every 10 calls that they received during the tax year. And again, this was a very busy tax season. There's a lot to process, lots of stimulus checks, the child tax credit, a lot of unemployment benefits, retroactive payments. It was a busy time for the IRS to administer all these different federally funded programs as part of COVID relief. But it took a long time. A lot of people got stuck in a vicious cycle with their tax return and their refunds. And not surprisingly, those people who actually did amended returns or who filed paper returns saw timelines that exceeded 10 months, which was, crazy. And, I've heard of stories that it's gone 12 months, 24 months. So it's been a pretty brutal tax season for everyone concerned. But hopefully now you'll see that this new funding will probably address a couple of these biggest things, right? Getting an IRS agent, talking to someone live, and then getting your return processed faster, whether it's regular, amended, or paper files. So hopefully all this funding and modernization will help with that. Clear. Everyone knows or should know, and I've got links in the description below, the Inflation Reduction Act passed by the Biden administration, over $1 trillion of spending, actually included funding for the IRS. So it included, roughly $80 billion over 10 years, not just all to be spent in 1 year, which does equate to about $300 per adult in the US, which is about 1/10 the average refund. But it does include that new funding for the IRS. And this is after decades of underspending, so the IRS is almost the same size as it was 20 years ago, even though tax laws have become far more complex and a lot more people are evading taxes with loopholes, etc. But this extra funding was much needed, and it will hopefully both improve how the IRS administers and also processes refunds, but also about enforcement, ensuring that people who owe taxes pay their fair share. Getting a live agent. This has been a huge challenge in the last 2 to 3 tax seasons, where the chronic understaffing and the high call volume have meant that the IRS has been unable to provide the level of service that taxpayers expect or even deserve. And I've written and posted many articles and videos around the challenge of getting a live IRS agent. So what the funding is going to do, especially that Janet Yellen said is going to happen a lot more aggressively in the next year, is they're going to hire up to 5,000 more additional call center phone reps to basically reduce the hold time from 50% to about 15 minutes. Some people on average, are waiting several hours, but the average is about 30 minutes from what the statistics came back. So they're trying to reduce that to 15 minutes or less. And they're going to have dedicated teams to deal with some of the complex and manual processing issues, people who get they get flagged for fraud or for other reasons. So they're going to have dedicated teams to help expedite some of those significant backlogs that many folks have been stuck, especially in the last two tax seasons. Now, will they be able to hire 5,000 new call center reps and train them in time? That's going to be challenging, but even if they can get to half this amount, it's going to significantly improve the service and response time of IRS agents. So we'll wait and see, but I think this is going to help a lot of people who have struggled to get answers on their tax return or their refund or when it's going to be paid. Speaking of adding more people, the IRS is also going to really ramp up capacity at taxpayer assistance centers. A lot of these places are where you can have in-person visits with the IRS agent or representatives. And during the pandemic, they were all sort of closed or very limited capacity, and you had to book appointments. But the good thing is now, Yellen's promised that with the new IRS funding, they'll actually triple the capacity for the next tax season, which should really help a lot of those people with in-person queries, those with complex returns, those who just need a hand. And these taxpayer assistance centers normally have a lot of people, either permanent employees or volunteers that can actually help with tax returns. And rather than calling someone on the phone trying to go through the details, it's just much easier to talk to someone in person as well, and also helps with identity verification, those kind of things. So having these open, I think, will definitely reduce the backlogs and help people submit more accurate returns. And the good thing is that they should expect to have all the taxpayer assistance centers fully staffed by next year. Again, this is subject to finding enough people, but that's the goal. And if that happens, it'll definitely reduce the incorrect returns and help people with questions that they have versus trying to get someone on the phone. The other big thing that all the extra funding is going to do is actually allow the IRS to modernize a lot of their old and legacy systems. Some systems go back 20, 30 years. So being able to modernize certain systems, processes will just mean faster processing and faster refunds. For example, the IRS still manually scans millions of individual paper returns, whether they're regular or amended returns, sent through mail. And even though, the large majority of returns are now filed electronically, there are still a considerable number, especially ones that have to be amended or have to be submitted late or just sent by paper because people don't have access to online tools. But these are all manually loaded, they're scanned in, then they have to be reviewed by the system. They tend to take several months, and are the ones that normally see the most delays, and there's no automatic checking that all the data entered is correct. So by automating this process of scanning millions of individual returns, it'll reduce the amount of time that takes. It'll mean faster processing and faster refunds as well. Another thing which I think will be really awesome is the IRS is going to finally build online capabilities to enable taxpayers to interact online with the IRS when they get a notice and a letter from the IRS. Today, you get that notice, you have to mail stuff back. It all happens through mail. Some are faxed, but it's all a very, sort of manual process. Whereas now, if you can do it online, maybe they'll have chatbots. They'll potentially be able to have secure messages through their existing IRS account. Being able to do it online, it's just going to reduce the time you have to wait for something to be mailed to get it back, the risk of losing forms and documents. So this will hold, and you'll be able to keep all the records in your IRS, which is your free IRS account. You'll be able to keep it all there. So this will be awesome. And I think this modernization, just a couple of the things that Yellen highlighted in his speech, I think will be a part of a broader effort across the IRS to modernize a lot of their systems. So this in itself, with the faster processing, the faster refunds will mean less wait time for tax filers and, hopefully improve the experience versus the last couple of years. So a big part of the funding, will actually go to increased IRS enforcement actions, so like audits, making sure that returns are submitted correctly, that people are paying their fair share of taxes. And in fact, it's this extra funding that's going to be raised with the IRS enforcement that's actually going to pay for a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act bill. So this is actually a key part of funding the bill, and it's also something that was identified by the administration and the IRS as a big area for recouping money. So in 2019, statistics from the Treasury find that the top 1% of Americans were estimated to owe a fifth of unpaid taxes, which is around 160 billion. And that shows that half of all the taxes that are unpaid are basically from complex sources or high net worth individuals, and not from salaried people who generally have a standard W-2. So it's all those people that, are sort of the higher net worth people, who have complex tax setups, who have foreign accounts. So that's who the IRS is really going to chase. Yellen did say in her statement that they're not going to target people earning less than 400,000. So the rate of audits will not go up for those people. But that the fact is they're going to try collecting, they feel like even if they can collect a portion of the $7 trillion in unpaid taxes, it'll more than fund the Inflation Reduction Act and a lot of the other government spending. And so this is a big focus for them. Now, a lot of people have read this and said, oh, we're going to have more audits. Well, audits are also different levels. You have different levels of audits. Sometimes it can just be, hey, we found a mistake, make the payment, and those, in most cases, that's what it is. You just agree with the IRS adjustment and you're good to go. They have then different degrees where they have in person, and then they have very detailed audits as well if they feel there's more behind that. But again, I think by targeting or aiming at the higher income people and corporations, they will probably recover a lot of unpaid taxes. And even just having this deterrent will probably force people to stop trying to take loopholes. I mean, you can look at the pandemic where so much fraud happened with the unemployment, with the PPA loans. So if people feel that they can get away with stuff, rich people have very good lawyers, very good accountants, they can probably figure out a lot of loopholes. So the IRS is going to basically really focus on enforcement, and a lot of that funding is going to go to that, which will pay for all the other benefits of faster refunds processings for the majority of Americans. But this is going to be something that will be rolled out over the next, several years. We will be hiring a lot more people, a lot more departments, using a lot of systems, a lot of artificial intelligence to drive some of this stuff. But you will probably see more notices, more mails if you have not filed accurately over the last few years. And going forward, especially, you just want to make sure that you're careful with your returns and, not claiming what you shouldn't be claiming and paying your fair share of taxes. Anyway, if all that information was useful to you, please hit the subscribe button below and the like button, and I'll keep posting more videos as the tax season progresses. Thank you.